The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Here's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. We're talking strategies for these must-win matchups as we head into the fantasy playoffs. Then we've got crazy division races going on and the ever-so-popular weekly waiver wire ads and drops. That's what's cooking on today's Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. Play ball! Welcome into the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com, SeatGeek, and Righteous Felon Jerky. It is another week of not only Major League Baseball, but fantasy baseball, and we're coming down to the end, and we're excited to talk all about that tonight. I'm your host, Vince Stover. I am joined, as I am every single week, by my cohort, I can't think of anything good to say. He's the senior writer for BellyUpFantasySports.com. He's the one and only Kevin Wilson. Hey, Kev.
Well, I guess I'm obligated to say, how's it going, A, to start off with. A, is the, as I reported last episode, we was our 20th wedding anniversary this week. We went to Niagara Falls and went up to Canada. We went to Canada 3 times, and I'm wearing my Canada shirt courtesy of our northern neighbors. So glad to be here. We had a great time, and fortunately the AC is restored, so we are back in our homes where we belong. So I am very excited to get started talking about baseball. I wasn't that focused on it, obviously, over the last week, but I am laser focused now, so I'm ready to go.
Yeah, we have 3 weeks left in fantasy regular season, and then we head down to, in our league, it's 2-week matchups, the final 4 teams. I'm in a couple leagues like that. I'm in another league that has 6, so the first 2 teams get a bye, and then it goes on from there. So lots of different things going on as far as that goes. But everyone's coming down to the final stretch now, where we get to the playoffs now, just 3 weeks left. It's pretty crazy to imagine that we've come this far from February all the way to January, I think is when we started this year, all the way to here. So we're getting there, but obviously a lot of things to talk about to finish out the fantasy baseball regular season, as well as plenty of news going on in regular baseball, Major League Baseball, of course, as well. Well, let's jump into segment number 1. We call this one our Fantasy Burner. Fantasy Burner is presented by SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com. Use the code BellyUpSports. You're going to get $20 off your purchase. Any game you're going to, make sure you check it out. SeatGeek.com. Code is BellyUpSports at checkout. All right, so what we're talking about here in our Fantasy Burner segment is strategies for must-win matchups. So 3 weeks to go. There are a lot of teams that have to win either all 3 weeks or 2 of the 3 weeks. Whatever it may be to get into the playoffs. You're fighting with guys. I've got one league where I am the 5th seed, and you got to be the top 4 to be in the playoffs. I've got another league where I'm in 1st place, trying to hold out there. I got our league where I'm in 3rd place, trying to sneak into 2nd. All kinds of things going on with this. So let's talk about some strategies that we can use in these must-wins, because the way that I look at it, Kevin, is I don't care about winning every week. I just care about winning when I have to. And in this year in our league, I've done decent. What have I lost? 5 games, I think. Yeah, I'm 14-5. I don't really fret too much early on in the season about winning the matchups. But as the season goes on, you have to. And when you get to this point now, it's do or die for a lot of people. So I want to start by saying this, because it's something we say often, but we usually talk about it the most at the beginning of the year, and that is know your league. You have to understand your rules. You have to understand your scoring. You've got to understand what seeds make the playoffs. Like, all of that is important, and it changes league to league. So you have to know your league. Make sure you are aware of what you have to do to win a matchup. and know what your tiebreaker is too. That's going to come into a factor as well. If you have a tiebreaker, of course, make sure you know what that is also. So I've got a few things to talk about, Kev. I'll start with you. What's a strategy here that we need to start thinking about as we get into these final weeks?
Well, the first strategy I think that we need to discuss is, during the season, you might be trying to, bring along, you're hoping, you're praying that this
Patience.
player, that's right, patience with this guy because he's a slow starter, whatever. And you're trying to get it so that he'll, start hitting like he's supposed to. All that's out the window now. So if you're in a must-win situation, there is no allegiances. There's none of that stuff. Doesn't matter if a guy's 86.7% rostered. If he is going 0 for 32 and you need the points to win your matchup, that guy's got to go. And so it doesn't matter. Let's say he goes off in the playoffs. But if you're not in the playoffs, none of that matters anyway.
Yeah.
So that's there is no allegiance. You don't love players. You don't any of that. I'm a Dodger guy, but if the Dodgers aren't producing, they got to go. So that's my very first thing is don't keep, people in, a nice comforting blanket and everything else, and you're massaging them, trying to get them to come around. They're not around. They've got to go.
Yeah, that's a great piece of advice. It's time to cut bait with guys who aren't performing at this time in the season. And like you said, I mean, you say, well, what happens if they get hot in the playoffs? Well, if you're not in the playoffs, it does not matter. You need to get there
at all.
So make things happen. Kind of to piggyback on that, I'm going to talk specifically about categories leagues. I know we focus on points leagues here. But in categories leagues, kind of with that, you have to know what categories you need. You need to go back and look at your record and where you're low on categories. And then you need to look at your matchup, where they're high at, things that aren't worth chasing versus things that are worth chasing. Let's say they've got a bunch of stolen bases. There's no way you're going to catch them on that. Well, don't worry about it. Punt on that, lose that category, and get a category that you're close in, and then make additions on the waiver wire for people who are good in those categories. And then you can catch them in those categories and overcome some things that way. And it goes right along with cutting guys that aren't performing. If you need home runs and you got a guy that's, not hitting home runs, if that's what you got to have to win the matchup, well, you get rid of them and you go get you someone who can hit home runs and you make that happen. Points leagues are slightly different. As far as you're not hunting categories, you're just hunting points in general. But that being said, you got to have guys who are performing at this point. And I think that's a great point, Kevin, for sure. All right, go ahead. What you got another one?
I got another one. And this has been what we've discussed the whole way, but it's hyper important now. And that's what you have to know the schedule. All right. And so I'm specifically talking about who's playing like the White Sox this week. Okay. In this case, it's the Yankees and the Astros. And so there are probably not a lot of players that may be available off those two teams, but if there are, you need to check that. And one of the guys because Jonathan Cannon is a dude I talked about last week, and he rewarded my confidence in him by pitching very well. But he goes up against the Yankees on Tuesday. And if you need to win, that's probably not the matchup that you want to pay attention to. If it was, week 2 or 5 or 6 or 8 or whatever, and you want to roll the dice a little bit because it's early in the week, you can feel free to do that. But if you need this win, then that's not what I'm looking at. A guy that it's specifically involved in this is a guy like Nestor Cortez, who has been dreadful, absolutely dreadful, but he pitches against the White Sox on Wednesday. And that's the kind of thing that if you need to win, you might want to go ahead and back up your truck and attach his trailer to it because it's the White Sox. And so that might work out for you. As far as the Astros, Hunter Brown is kind of available in a lot of leagues, but if he is, he pitches against them this weekend. UC Kikuchi is another guy that's probably not available. With those two guys, if they are, you need to go ahead and add them before your opponent does, because they're pitching against the White Sox, and that's the kind of thing that you want to do. If who's playing the Marlins? In this case, it's the Phillies and the Mets. And we've talked about Christopher Sanchez has not been very strong down the stretch, but he pitches against them next weekend. And Sean Manaea and Luis Severino is a couple other guys that you might want to take a look at and see if they're available, because those are advantage of schedule. They're playing the Marlins. Doesn't get any better than that as far as pitching is concerned. So you need to be hyper aware of what your schedule is and what's coming up so that you can make the moves before the guy that you're playing does do that.
All right. I'm going to go to one that I'm sure you have on your list, and that's using all your pitching starts. Do not leave any available pitching starts open in your lineup. And along with that, make sure you save a spot for Sunday. So our league goes Monday through Sunday. So what we do in the ESPN leagues, you can go over your pitching limit as long as you haven't come up to your pitching limit by Sunday. So let's say you have 8 starts limit in your week. If you come into Sunday having used 7 of them, you can pitch 5 guys on Sunday if you want to. And so you want to make sure you listen. If you go through a matchup and a must-win matchup and you don't use all your starting your pitchers, you don't use all your starts, you've failed. Just plain and simple. And you need to make sure, but you're going to need to look ahead and make sure that you're planning it out so that you do not accidentally hit your limit on Friday or Saturday. And you got to be willing to take some risks on Sunday. If you're right there and you're losing, or you're close and they've got pitchers going and you don't have any, or you only have one, you're going to have to take a swing on some guys that maybe you typically wouldn't. So do some research on the matchups. Try to figure out what's there. Kevin, that might be a good article for you this week if you're not too busy doing other things. Sunday starts, and see who's going to be starting on Sunday that people can pick up and add to their team. But ESPN League, you can manipulate that where you can start a bunch of guys on Sunday and go over your limit. We see that a lot in our leagues, and we got some smart guys that have been doing those kinds of things, but do not go through the week having not used all of your starts.
I agree with that 100%. And I'm going along with what I'm saying about the schedule, because you know that on like a Thursday, there are only a few games scheduled. There are 7 teams that are playing this Thursday, and you don't want to have any open slots in your lineup. If you have an open slot, that's no points for you. And so that goes back to maybe somebody is off and you don't really want to drop them, but they're not helping. So go ahead and get somebody in your lineup that is playing. And so that's one of the other things. Monday is another day that doesn't have typically a lot of teams playing, but Thursday is the day you want to target that you only have 4 players in your lineup. That's not good. And so once again, you want to get that before your opponent does, so that you can get the points while they're over there going, hey, because I'm aggressive anyway. Yeah. And that's just the way I play it. But hyper aggressiveness is not a bad thing at this point in the season. And if it doesn't work out, at least you're trying your best to secure the better matchup to get you where you're trying to go.
So I want to put a caveat on that, because I've differed from you on this strategy for the most part, although at this time of year it does change for me more to what you're talking about. I don't think it's horrible to have, 1, maybe 2 empty spots if you don't have guys that you can drop. But a lot of times you can drop relief pitchers or something like that to add guys versus dropping hitters that are scoring for you. You don't want to drop them just to add a guy to have them on Thursday. So the caveat that I'll put in is look at who you're playing and have more guys in the lineup than him. So if he has 4 guys in the lineup and you can put 7 guys in the lineup, that's going to be a boost for you. That doesn't mean everyone's full, but you've got more than he does. I think that's the only caveat I put in, because I know I have looked at it and said, man, I really want someone hitting here, but I don't feel comfortable dropping anybody that I have. And I go through that
Be smart about
every year. Yeah. Yeah. You're
Be
not going to
smart
drop
about
Aaron Judge because he's not playing on Thursday.
No.
And I know you're not saying that.
That's what, be smart about it.
Yeah.
But if there's a guy, like I said, I'll give you an example right now. Bryson Stott of the Philadelphia Phillies. He is currently in a 2 for 30 slump and has 2 runs and 2 RBIs in that. And that, if let's say he's not playing on Thursday, I haven't looked ahead but let's say he's not. And there's somebody that's in the lineup, and there's another thing is maybe the other team has a right-handed pitcher going, and there's a left-hander on the other one that smokes right-handed pitching. Make that switch.
Yeah.
And so don't worry about if Bryson Stott hits 3 home runs next week. This is the week that you're concerned about. And another one on my team is Anthony Volpe of the Mets, or not the Mets, the Yankees. I'm sorry. He struck out 7 times in his last 3 games. If that continues, and he's not playing on Thursday, he's going to have to go, even though he's probably 80% rostered. But you can't have a guy that's giving you -7 points in 3 games.
Right.
And so that's what I'm saying. Just be smart about it. Know what you're trying to do, and what you're trying to do is get better. And if that works out, and you get a guy and he gets you points, then that's what you're trying for.
I like it. Another strategy, again, it's just knowing your league. So it's going to be kind of a twofold, or option 1, option 2 here. If you have a league like ours where holds is something that gets you points, use relief pitchers. You rotate through. If one guy pitches on Monday, drop him and pick up another guy for Tuesday. So you're going to be getting points, because if he pitches on Monday, he's probably not pitching on Tuesday. So you're not going to drop the top tier relief pitchers, but there's a lot of guys that are getting holds. If he pitches on Monday, go ahead and cut him loose and grab another guy for Tuesday. Keep the relief pitchers going. Now, if you do not have a league that has holds, so the only value you're getting is saves and strikeouts, then what I would say is, honestly, I think you punt. Unless you have a top tier closer, I think you cut your relief pitchers, and that's when you make sure all your batting spots are full. You do not go a day without all of your batting spots full. So if a guy is going to sit out and miss a game, a catcher is not going to play, drop a relief pitcher, go pick up a catcher. Have somebody in the lineup every single day at every position. That's easier to do when all you have is saves counting for you versus holds as well. If you have holds, then it's a lot easier to go out and get relief pitchers. Go find a guy that's going to be out there in the 7th or 8th inning, and bring those guys in every day. You can make a move every single day. Now, know your league. If you have limits on how many waiver claims you can have in a week, then you got to be really smart about that and make sure you're not getting bad matchups and things like that. But in our league with holds, we've seen Chase do this, who won the league last year. I'm pretty active with holds. I don't really go for a lot of saves. I go for holds. It's the same amount of points for us, and they're easier to get. There's a lot more of them. And so, just focusing on rotating through those relief pitchers can help you gather a lot of points if you've got a league that allows you to do so. So that's the twofold part of it, is either going heavy on relief pitchers throughout the week, or if all you're getting is saves out of your relief pitchers, well, then go ahead and go heavy on your batting. Get the right guys, the right matchups. You can do that with you don't have to drop a batter then. And you can go get a guy that's, a lefty facing a righty or something to that effect, or a guy that's in a good ballpark, and you can rest a guy that, you normally have in your lineup that's struggling or doesn't do well against that pitcher or whatever it may be, matchups bad, and put in another guy in his place. You should be checking the waiver wire. If you're in a must-win matchup, you should probably be claiming someone at least every day.
That certainly makes sense to me, because also, since baseball is hung up on starting these games at 11:30 in the morning,
yeah,
right?
Yeah,
or noon on a Thursday, I don't know who they expect to go to these games, but let's say you're Nathan, right? And the game starts at 11:30. That's 8:30 your time in the morning.
Yeah, out in California. Yeah.
Out in California. So most leagues that I'm aware of have daily moves you can make. And so you want to be aware of what time, because there was a game that started at 10:30 our time here. So if you need to make a move and this guy's out of the lineup, but the game's already started, he's stuck now.
You're in
He can't
trouble if
move.
you're in ESPN leagues. Yeah. Yeah.
Yep, in ESPN leagues, I think that's pretty universal, isn't it?
No,
Pretty
Yahoo, you can pick up guys in the middle of the day if they haven't played yet. You can pick them up and put them in your lineup.
Okay. That goes back to know your league.
That's the only positive to Yahoo leagues, in my opinion. But,
okay,
but it is
that's about the only positive I've heard in the last. However, I was in a Yahoo league one time, and I was not impressed. I haven't done it again since then. But that goes back to know your league. And if you're in an ESPN league, first game of the day, you can't pick up anybody else after that.
Yeah.
And so let's say you have a starter. We mentioned about the White Sox, and they're playing a game, and you like the starter going against them, but they already started the game. Oh, well for you.
Yep.
So know your league, know the schedule, and manage your team. And now's not the time. Like last week, this past week was my anniversary week, so
yeah.
I was not as laser focused. But like I said, this week going forward, I'll be laser focused. I'll know what time the games start, and so I'll be making moves as best I can to win the matchup. So that's pretty much it. Know your league and know what time these games start, because I guess they want to go out with their wives after the game. I'm not sure, but
so to go with that, Kevin, and man, this is the advice I hate to give, although I'm sure veteran players already know this. The time to go pick up pitchers for the next day is as soon as that first game throws out the first pitch.
Absolutely. You are on point with that.
Yeah, because as soon as that first pitch goes out in the day for Major League Baseball, ESPN then puts up the probable starters for the next day. You can go right in. So if the game starts at 11:30, I mean, I'm telling you, 11:29, you can go in and you can go claim pitchers for the next day. And anybody that you add, they won't be added till the next day. Anybody you drop won't be dropped until the next day. If you're doing it in that waiver claim fashion. And so go out and get those guys. I was talking to my dad this week. He already knew this, but I was talking to my dad this week. I said, you got to beat Dan. You stick with it. Do not let him catch up with you. And I said, as soon as that first pitch goes out, you go get your guys for the next day. I said, do not let anybody beat you on those claims. Like I said, he already knew that. He was already working on that. But know when you're allowed to. Yahoo's different. That's why you got to wait till the actual next day for Yahoo. But in ESPN leagues, there are ways to get ahead of everybody, and that's how you do it. I've got one more, Kevin. You got anything else you want to share on
it? That's pretty much it. On my end.
Last thing I got is, and it kind of goes right along with everything we've been saying, but don't get behind early. Don't get down. If you're in a points league, don't get down by 100 points on the first day. Like, you got to have players in. And I know it sounds silly, and while, he has a big day on Monday, I can have a big day on Tuesday. Yeah, but if you get so far behind early, it's just impossible to catch up. You don't get enough pitchers in. You don't have all these other things going on. Other people are claiming guys too. So you want to make sure that tomorrow morning your lineup is set with guys who are going to be playing. That there's always the bad luck. There's always the day where you got a pitcher goes -17. You can't do anything about that. But you have to understand you can't let Monday slide. Like, get Monday set up now. And then get Tuesday set up Monday night. Like, be ready each day with this, because if your opponent gets way ahead of you, it is so hard to catch up. And you've got to just make sure you stick with it every single day. Don't miss out. Set alarms if you have to. Do not miss out. Do not be sitting there with a guy like Garrett Cole on your bench because you forgot to go in and change your lineup. Like, you've got to focus and make sure you stay in the hunt all week long. So that's my last piece of advice.
That's right. That's a great point, because like I said earlier, if it's week 7 and let's say it's Friday, Saturday, you're trailing by 108 points, you can punt to the next week.
Right.
That could be part of your strategy. That will not work out.
No, it will not.
Unless you're, you've got your. We're not talking about people that are locked into the playoffs.
Right.
We're not talking about that. People that need the wins can't punt this week. So keep that in mind.
Very good. All right. This segment, the Fantasy Burner, is presented by SeatGeek. Go to SeatGeek.com. Use the code BellyUpSports at checkout for $20 off your purchase. Let's head into segment number 2, the call to the pin. Our call to the pin is presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. You can go to righteousfelon.com to get the best jerky of your life. Use the code STOVE15. You're going to get 15% off your purchase each and every time. Righteousfelon.com, code STOVE15. All right, let's jump into this. First of all, I just want to again comment, Jackson Holiday, congrats, man. He just keeps doing it. And I'm so happy for him that, at the beginning of the year, I was so high on him. I drafted him in every single league I was in. It obviously did not work out for me. But his second time up, he's doing what we thought he was going to do when he had his chance in the major leagues. And I'm glad for him, happy for him, and happy for everyone who's claimed him. I know, Kevin, you've got him in our league. I have him in a league. I had him in 4 leagues at one point, but I've got him in 1 league now. And I just think it's great. I think it's great to watch what he's doing. And we'll take a look here at the end of the year at these rookies and some of the things these guys have done. But I'm impressed. I'm happy for him and what's going on there for Jackson Holiday.
Yes, very much so.
Let's talk division races right now because they got really interesting this week. Milwaukee has held a steady lead over St. Louis. They're 7.5 up on them. It's gotten a little bigger even this week. There. So we're going to skip over the NL Central. Pittsburgh, by the way, is in last place now. That has gone between the Cubs, the Reds, and now the Pirates down there at the bottom of the Central.
That's what happens when you go 1-9.
Yeah. The NL East, Philadelphia has been in control of the division, but for a very short time this week, the New York Mets were in second place. And right now they're tied for second with Atlanta. I'm not worried about the Mets. I don't think the Mets are even going to make the playoffs. But my goodness, to me, the Mets are last year's Red Sox, where they're just they're doing enough, man. They're just sticking around there to be in that hunt. I mean, when they were in second, Atlanta was out of the wild card race. And, if you would have said at any point to me this year, the Mets would be above Atlanta and Atlanta would be out of the playoffs, I'd say you're crazy. But Atlanta's beat up. We know that. Right. I'm just surprised the Mets are being able to hang around right now.
Yep, and they are, as you mentioned, they are tied with Atlanta, and so they're right there. And you're looking at what was that, a couple months ago, maybe a month and a half ago? We were like, there's nobody to cheer for because there's no close races. Well, that's right. Way out the window now, especially in the National League, because you've got Atlanta and New York tied. The Giants and St. Louis are a game and a half out. And here comes the Cubs. You're going to need to speak about this curse. I don't know what's happening there because they're 3 games out. They've won 8 out of their last 10. And so I'm sure that's they're just trying to appease somebody. I don't know, but I don't see that as something that's going to continue. And I'm not really concerned about them making the playoffs, but at least they're making it so there's something to discuss about the playoffs. So I appreciate that.
Sure. The Cubs are 3 games out of the wild card, but they're also 1 game under 500. Like, let's not get carried away.
Right. Yeah.
Listen, they had a good week. They've won 4 straight, 8 of the last 10. They're a Major League Baseball team. It's not the White Sox. So they're going to have stretches where they're going to look decent. And they've got a decent team. I've got a guy on my ads this week from Chicago. So, But at the end of the day, I mean, if the Cubs make a run and let's say they end the season 10 games over 500, I will be shocked. I will be absolutely shocked. But back to it, the NL West got interesting as well. At one point, it looked like the Padres, they were 2.5 back. Right now, Padres and the Arizona Diamondbacks are 3.5 back from the Dodgers. The Dodgers got some things rolling, 3 straight wins, as well as Arizona. But if you look at the stuff going on in this division, first of all, back to the NL East. No team in the NL East has a winning record in the last 10 games. Philadelphia's 4-6, Atlanta's 3-7, the Mets are 4-6, the Nationals are 5-5, and Miami's 4-6. In the NL West, it's a totally different story. Dodgers 6-4 in the last 10, 3-game win streak. Arizona's 8-2. San Diego's 8-2. San Francisco 7-3. Even Colorado at 5-5. An impressive 10 days for them. So, listen, San Diego and Arizona are making their run. We could see a wild card where San Diego and Arizona are in the wild card, both of them. Dodgers, of course, still winning the division. And I think that's probably right now, if I was a betting man, I would bet on Arizona and San Diego making the playoffs.
I would as well. They're both playing extraordinarily well, and they finally kicked out all of the delays that both teams were having. And so San Diego finally – this is the thing about San Diego, though, that concerns me, because they're not playing well at home for the season. They just finished up a road trip, which now they're going back home. So if we're going to take them seriously, they need to play well at home. Arizona is just playing well everywhere to me. And they've got Colorado starting, so they've got the advantage right there.
Yeah.
Okay. So they've got the advantage, even though they're 5-5. That's because they are just finishing up a homestand. And they're getting ready to go to Arizona. And we all know Colorado's a different team altogether. They're not that great to begin with, but they're not the same hitting team on the road they've never been. That's even worse this year. So Arizona, we've talked about them. You and I both believe in them. And San Diego's winning me over.
Yep.
And when you look at the hitters, San Diego's got hitters.
Yeah.
And so this is going to be very interesting. You know, I've got a vested interest in the Dodgers, of course, but and fortunately enough for the Dodgers, because Mookie Betts returns.
Yes, he does.
Tomorrow.
Take him off your injured list. Put him in the
coming off the
lineup.
injured list. He's going to play the outfield, which makes him so he won't lose his outfield eligibility for next year, but that's a different story altogether. But he'll be on the team. And so and Milwaukee and the Dodgers start a 4-game series tomorrow.
That's right.
So in Milwaukee.
Yeah.
So I expect Milwaukee to be absolutely ablaze up there, and people packing in the stadium. So that's going to be very fun to watch. And hopefully you'll get some TV, be able to watch any of those games while they're doing it.
It is possible, and even, I mean, not necessarily likely, but very possible that 4 of the 6 NL playoff teams could be from the NL West. With the way the Giants are playing right now, only a game and a half back from Atlanta, you could have I don't think this is going to happen, but you can have San Francisco, San Diego, Arizona as your wild card teams, with the Dodgers, Phillies, and Brewers as your division winners. That would be nuts.
This is an exciting week because the Giants host the Braves.
Oh my.
This week. And so they can completely muddy up the waters if they continue playing well and beat them. Atlanta might be out of a playoff spot by the time we, get together again. So this is good stuff right here. Baseball, football's wanting to say hello and all that, but stay with baseball because it's getting ready to be real exciting.
Yeah. American League East is the same story. Baltimore and New York knotted up at the top. Boston, playoff team, but not a division winning team. In AL Central, Minnesota was a game and a half back at one point this week. They're now 3.5 back. Cleveland was on a nasty losing streak there for a while, but they've won their last 2. And Cleveland still remains in charge there in the Central. Minnesota and Kansas City, though, are not going away.
No, they are not. And Minnesota's, they played a doubleheader on Friday. They swept that doubleheader. And so Cleveland's, I'm sure their shorts were, they needed to check their shorts after that was over with. And but like I said, as true teams, true competitors and true guys that you're supposed to, want to win, they've responded. by winning their last 2. And so Minnesota, they're winning me over. Kansas City, I'm still with them. And it's going to be 4 games separate 2 teams. And, of course, Houston and Seattle still battling. But we've got some divisional races now.
Yeah.
Where we didn't have any of that going on for most of the summer.
Yeah. In the West, you've said it a while back, counting out the Rangers. I'm officially on board with that now. I wanted to kind of give them a chance, but nope, ain't going to happen. Seattle and Houston. Houston's up by half a game. Seattle is 3 games out of the wild card. So right now you're looking at Yankees or Orioles, whoever doesn't win the East, Minnesota and Kansas City in. Boston and Seattle are both 3 games back. I still think Kansas City will fade, but I mean, listen, they're doing it. Pitchers are pitching well. Michael Wacha had another good week. There have been some good things in Kansas City. MJ Melendez woke up at one point as well. So, I mean, there's some things happening in Kansas City that are good. But I think that Kansas City, Boston, Seattle race is going to be a lot of fun to watch in the wild card as well. And, Houston only a half game up. They're on a 5-game win streak. Seattle's on a 3-game win streak. So there's not been any separation over there in the West, but I'll put my eggs in the Houston basket and feel pretty comfortable about it.
Right. I do as well. And both, because the Twins come in here and play Texas. And as you just mentioned, that's no longer that tough a deal they have to deal with. The Royals roll into Cincinnati, and especially Witt. That dude has gone supersonic, so he may hit 3 or 4 home runs in that series. So they're both of those teams don't have any tough opponents in their first part of this week, so there's no advantage there. So I still expect both of those teams to be right there by the end of next week.
Very good. All right. That's all we're going to talk about in this segment today. It's going to be fun. We'll keep you posted over in the coming weeks for sure. This is our call to the pin presented by Righteous Felon Jerky. Go to righteousfelon.com. Use that code STOVE15. That's STOVE15 to get 15% off your purchase. I do not have a council curse this week. But I will say this, as I already said, they're still under 500. So I think the curse is still alive in Chicago at the very least. All right, let's go into our final segment of the week, and that is the Fantasy Focus. Fantasy Focus is presented by BellyUpFantasySports.com. There's a lot of fantasy football stuff going on right now, pre-draft information, things like that going on the Belly Up Fantasy website. Of course, there's still some baseball stuff coming out as well. So check that out. You can find almost all of Kevin Wilson's articles there on BellyUpFantasySports.com. All right. So I want to start with the drops again this week, Kevin. I've got 3 guys this week, and I'll start us off with Mitch Garver. Mitch Garver is a guy who had moments this season, even recently, where he was kind of the hot catcher out there. Not at the moment, not so much right now. On the season, he's only batting 167. And really, I guess middle of July, he had a decent run, but since then, he's had several negatives. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of his last almost 10 games have been negative points, or 0 points for another 3 of those games, and 1 point for the rest of them. So it's not been pretty for Mitch Garver. If he's on your roster, I'll give you another catcher in a minute that you can pick up, but Mitch Garver should not be rostered. He's only rostered in 9.2% of leagues. That should give you at least a little bit of a sign. But Mitch Garver is an easy drop this week if he's currently on your roster.
Okay, so I'm going to go with a player that I've got a big star next to his name. I want to make sure I get this guy. He was on my team. He's been on my team all season. And he's relief pitcher David Bednar of the Pittsburgh Pirates. Okay, so 61.8% roster. That's a little down now because I cut him loose. And He's given up runs in 4 straight appearances.
Yikes.
As a relief pitcher, that is a big yikes, but not nearly as a big a yikes as he blew 2 saves in saves on consecutive days. He came in and negative 5 points. I was like, well, that's kind of sorry, but okay. Then the next day he came out and blew a big lead, negative. He blew it. He lost, negative 14 points. So that's 19 negative points in a 2-day span. And
Yikes.
his ERA, he started off pretty bad, but he rallied a little bit. So I kept him on my team. And as we're talking about, it's getting to the point where no, you cannot keep these guys on your team. We're getting ready to get to the end. 5.77 ERA does not cut it in any shape or form, especially if that's your closer. And so he's got to go. There's no and the Pirates are fading, as we mentioned. He probably won't get that many saves to protect anyway. So he is a big flashing neon sign red. He's got to go.
Agreed. I'm going to go outfielder Brian De La Cruz. Gets traded to Pittsburgh last month. Since coming over to Pittsburgh, he has -6 fantasy points. The only day he had a positive was 1-pointer against Houston, his first game in Pittsburgh. Since then, it's either been zeros or negatives, or he hasn't even played in 2 games. So he's owned in 19.3% of leagues. So I know most people have this already down, but 20% of you haven't figured it out yet. Brian De La Cruz should not be on your roster at this point in the season. Cut him loose.
Okay, I agree with that. And you started with the catcher. I'm going to fall right in line with you. And this is a guy who's had some nice times this year, but it has grounded to a halt. And that's Logan O'Hop over there in Anaheim.
Yeah.
Okay. 46.4% rostered. All right. He's 0 for his last 22. This is what he's done: -1, 0, 1, -2, -4, 2, -3. So that means in the last 4 days, he struck out 9 times. Okay. That's no way to have for a catcher on your team. There are catchers, if you're in one of our leagues where there's even this late in the season, there are catchers that you can get on your team. You don't need to be holding on to somebody who's going 0 for 22, who's striking out 9 times in a 4-game span. So I really liked him earlier, but no, that has crashed and landed. So if you need a catcher, don't look to O'Hop because it's not happening.
Yeah, he's a guy that had his moments this season for sure.
He did.
But yeah, not great at the moment. So I'm going to mention a guy in my drops that you actually talked about in our first segment as a positive. And I understand why, and I'll explain my reasoning behind it as well. It's Luis Severino. This week he does play Miami, which is why you brought him up as a positive. That being said, he is dropping off. It's not great right now. He's had 2 straight losses. He has had a -8 points, 2 points against Colorado at Colorado, and an 11-pointer against Seattle. His last matchup against Miami was July the 20th, and he scored 25 fantasy points. So you might be thinking, well, if he's done that well, then obviously stick around with him. Here is my argument against Luis Severino. 2018 and 2017, when he was with the Yankees, he pitched 190-plus innings. In 2019, he pitched 12 innings. 2021, he pitched 6 innings. 2022, 102 innings. 2023, 89 innings. And so far this season, 128 innings. The highest workload he's had since 2018. Luis Severino, I am terrified that he is losing it at this point in the year, even though he's got the matchup against Miami. Unless I am desperate, I am not putting Luis Severino in my roster, even up against Miami this week. And I could be wrong. I've been wrong before on these kinds of things, but I just don't like where he's at workload wise. Even though it's a good matchup for him, it would scare me to have him going for me.
Well, as I said, by the time you get to that point, you're going to know if you're, like we mentioned, if you're behind.
Yeah.
Go ahead. What's the harm?
Right.
But if he wasn't playing against Miami, there would be no mention of his name, whatever, on my end. So that's the only reason why I'm saying that. And okay, so I'm going to bring up a couple of Dodgers, which might be surprising because, like I said, there's no allegiance. And the first guy I'm going to talk about is Gavin Stone. This guy has been awful. And this is what I'm saying: 12 runs on 23 hits in his last 14.2 innings. And on Tuesday, he goes up against the Milwaukee Brewers. As you know, got an offense. This is what he's done over his last, let me see, he's had one decent start out of his last 6. But other than that, -6, -2, 10, 0, -4, 3. There's no chance that this guy should be on a fantasy team putting those kind of numbers up, even though he pitches for the Dodgers. And he pitches, like I said, against Milwaukee. That is Death Valley days to me. I don't want any part of Gavin Stone going forward, especially this week. Maybe you can win me back over, but this week, that's Death March, and I don't want any part of it.
Okay. I don't have any other drops. Who else you
Okay,
got?
so the other is a guy that I mentioned maybe a couple weeks ago, and that's Ahmed Rosario. Went to the Dodgers. He plays everywhere. You think, okay, he's going to be in their lineup. He's had one at bat this week. One. And that's all. Okay.
And with Mookie Betts coming back, he ain't gonna have a whole lot more.
Mookie Betts coming back, and Gavin Lux is actually playing pretty well. So his playing time is going to be minuscule anyway. And so you can cancel what I said back a couple weeks ago. Adam, if you did that, I apologize to you. But drop him, get him off your team. It doesn't matter if he plays 78 positions. He's not getting playing time. So he needs to be dropped.
I like it. All right, let's go to additions this week. And I want to talk about a guy that you've talked about before, and different weeks, and it's usually been a matchup thing. But I think maybe this is a guy that you don't need to drop anymore. I think this might be a guy that you should go ahead and sit on your roster. And he's from the Oakland A's, JP Sears, out there in Oakland. He's got 285 fantasy points on the year, 101 strikeouts, 4.32 ERA. In his last 3 games, July the 30th, 32 fantasy points, 7 innings, 9 strikeouts, no earned runs against San Francisco. On the 5th of August, he went 7 innings, 5 strikeouts, 1 earned run against the White Sox for 27 fantasy points. And then against Toronto on the 11th, he went 7 innings, 4 strikeouts, 3 earned runs, still got 22 fantasy points in that one. On Sunday, this is the last day of your matchup. Next Sunday, he faces off again against San Francisco, who just 2 weeks ago he had 32 fantasy points against there. So the only difference is that was at San Francisco. He'll be at home this time. But JP Sears has been sought 285 fantasy points. He's in the right tier there as well. He's only available in 73% of leagues. So go get him if he's there, and you may have to pick him up a day or two early versus waiting till Sunday to get him. He might be a guy you need to go claim on a Thursday or a Friday to make sure you've got him starting on Sunday. I really like what JP Sears has done this year, and like I said, at this point, if I get him on my roster, he's staying on my roster.
Okay. I will not argue with you on that. That's a good point. So my first guy, unbelievably enough, I'm going to the Tampa Bay Rays, and that's Jose Caballero. Okay. Now, if you had Ahmed Rosario on your team, you're like, hey, I like the flexibility. This guy plays second base, short, and third. Okay. He's at 10.4% rostered, has hits in 6 straight games. He has 4 stolen bases. So we talked about category leagues a little bit ago. If you need stolen bases, this is a guy to look to. And he's got 32 on the season. So he's not afraid to go and get on base and try and steal a base. And so everything is set for this guy. I like what he's doing, and maybe not the lineup so much. But if you're in need of a guy and you like the flexibility as I do, and he's certainly available in a lot of leagues, I like Caballero a lot.
All right. let's see. You kind of threw me off with that one, but
Okay.
but hey, I like your arguments. I'm gonna go to someone who's worse than that. The Miami Marlins and pitcher Edward Cabrera.
Okay.
Not typically do I look at the Marlins for pitching, but Cabrera in his last 2 games, he went up against Atlanta and scored 23 fantasy points, 8 strikeouts over 5 innings. And then against San Diego, he returns with a 7-inning, 4 strikeout, no earned runs, 19-point performance there as well. And on Friday, he's pitching against the Mets. And I got to be honest with you, Kevin, I like a matchup against the Mets for pitchers right now. And the last time he faced the Mets, he only got 4 fantasy points, but he did that by only giving up 1 earned run. He also only had 1 strikeout, and he had 5 walks, excuse me. But I love the matchup against the Mets, and I think he's a sneaky good start this week against them on Friday. So Edward Cabrera, he's available in 95% of leagues. So go out and grab him as a start this week.
Okay, so the guy that I have has made 1 start this year. 1. That's it. But that's Eduardo Rodriguez of the Arizona Diamondbacks. And he's at 33% rostered, which means he's probably not available all over the place. But you need to check it out if he is and go and get him. First start of the year, 5 2/3 innings. That's what he did. Gave up 3 runs on 4 hits, 2 walks. So everything looks lined up there. Tuesday versus the Colorado Rockies at home. It doesn't get much better than that. So I think he's going to be outstanding. That's a big boost for Arizona. I like what he's got to come. There won't be any innings. Once 5 2/3 in his first start, it's only going to get better from there. So he's a guy I think that you can attach your wagon to, and he's going to be a guy that can get you to the promised land. And because Arizona's right there, they're going to be in it. So I like him a whole lot going down the stretch.
Very good. Let's see here. My next guy is a catcher. I told you I was going to give you one later in the show.
Okay.
And it's Joey Bart, and he's in Pittsburgh now, if you didn't know. Only owning 3.9% of leagues. In the last 2 weeks, he has scored the most out of available fantasy catchers right now. He had good series against Houston, good series against Arizona twice, good series against San Diego, and a pretty decent series against the Dodgers. They do face off against San Diego to start off the week as well. But again, in his last time against the Padres, he scored 8 fantasy points in that series. So Joey Bart right now, again, if you don't have a top-tier catcher and you've been kind of rolling through him, you mentioned Logan O'Hoppy's got to be gone. I mentioned as well a catcher that's got to be gone. So let's get in Joey Bart right now while things are going well for him. And again, he has only had 1 game off. I guess back on July 28th, he was a DH and went 1 for 1. And then on August 7th, he did not play, but he has played every other game in the last 2-3 weeks. So check out Joey Bart right now. He's available. Go snag him as your catcher if you need one.
Okay, so the next guy we talked about the Astros early on, and unbelievably enough, they have a pitcher who is available, but not in our league. All right, Nathan or your dad, I don't know if you noticed that. As soon as we got done last week, went there, and there was your dad adding somebody that I mentioned. So I know he's watching. So Dale, he's not available, but his name is Spencer Arrighetti. Okay, what a great name that is.
Like spaghetti Arrighetti, yeah.
I guess so. That's what it is. He's only at 12% rostered, which is just mind-blowing to me. He's pitched 6 innings or more in 5 straight starts. 25 strikeouts in his last 2 games against just 3 walks. Okay, Friday, as I mentioned, versus the Chicago White Sox. There doesn't get any better than that. So if you're in a league that's not ours, go and see if Arrighetti, see if he's going to be having spaghetti. All right. And if he is, get him on your team long before Friday, before someone else swoops in. And someone's going to, if he's available, we'll get him long before Friday. So if you're in a league, he's available, go get him and do it soon.
Awesome. My last guy is a guy. If you're in a categories league, this is not for you. Okay, I'll just tell you right now, not for
Okay.
you. But in points leagues, definitely worthwhile going and getting because he's hot right now. Pete Crow Armstrong from the Chicago Cubs. Only 95 fantasy points on the year. Many of those have come recently. Against Kansas City, he put up 10 points in that series. Against Cincinnati, only 4 points. Against St. Louis, he drops 12 points. Against Minnesota, he went for 5 points. And in a 2-game series against the White Sox, 6 points here as of late. Now they've got Cleveland coming up Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. But after that, the Cubs are going against Toronto, Detroit, Miami, Pittsburgh, and Washington. That's their next matchups. All pretty decent matchups. So Pete Crow Armstrong, he was a guy that was looked at as going to be one of the next things for Chicago. It hadn't worked out that way, but right now he's playing some really good baseball, and he's only owned in 3% of leagues. So with all these matchups coming, now's the time to get him. If you can wait till Wednesday or Thursday when the matchups get better, by all means, go for it. But it might not be bad having him up against even Cleveland this coming week, at least in my opinion.
Okay, so one last guy that I have, and we mentioned Rosario. You drop him. Maybe you're saying Caballero. I'm not feeling it. How about Isaiah Kiner Falefa?
Okay.
Over there, you mentioned a Pirate. How about him? All right, second, short, third, outfield, 9.8% roster. Okay, so 2 hits in 3 of his last 4 games. 4 of his 6 games, he has 2 hits in. And so this guy, he's batting up there in the lineup. He's not getting much protection, but if you're looking for a guy that plays every day and wherever you need him, then he's a guy that I would look to that's available. And I would go after Caballero first, but if for some reason he's not, check out Isaiah Kiner Falefa. He's kind of forgotten now he's on Pittsburgh, but as I said, 2 hits in 4 of 6 games. He needs to have a roster home.
The reason why you threw me off with that Tampa ad, and again, I think he's good to be on teams and all that kind of stuff. I don't think that's a bad pick. I still believe Junior Caminero is going to be the guy in Tampa. Now, he hasn't been called up yet. He's still in AAA. And
that is a mystery of all mysteries to me.
Yes. There's not a single thing that I've read that goes, this makes sense. Everyone is saying, why is he not up? Why is he not? He's been really good playing down there in AAA. He came off the injured list, I think 2 weeks ago now, and played well. And it's like, well, they got spots open. Like, what are they waiting on with him? So I've picked him up in one league where I had the ability to do so, where I could have him sitting there and it not affect me at all. Keep your eyes out for guys like that. These call-ups towards the end of the year, especially for the not so good teams, just keep your eye open for these call-ups. There's going to be some guys that come up that you might be able to sneak on your team and get some pretty good value out of here at the end of the year as well. All right, Kev, what do you got going on this week on BellyUpFantasySports.com?
Well, I'm going to re-engage myself because, as I mentioned, I was not engaged last week. Well, I was with my wife on vacation for an anniversary.
Yeah.
Okay. So there was no activity on the Belly Up Fantasy website this week from me. However, this week I have developed, I'm going to look at, and we've talked about in fantasy football, why would you maybe take one player over another? So I'm going to introduce who I think which teams have the easiest fantasy schedule and which teams have the most difficult opening schedule. So if that kind of swings you one way or the other, then that just gives you something else to consider. And so that's something I developed a little bit, while I was just, goofing off a little bit. And so that's where I think I'm going to head this week. And so you can expect that to be on the Belly Up Fantasy website this week. And as you can always catch me on X or Twitter, whatever, Kevin62, WILSEA.
Awesome. Let's see here. My content this week, I was trying to have a show tomorrow, local hour with EKU stuff, but it's probably not going to happen. Getting guests is hard right now just because they're in the middle of camp heading into the regular football season. So there's a good chance no show tomorrow night. Wednesday night, me and Dad will be back. We'll be talking the West divisions of the NFL, previewing those. We've already done the East, the North, and the South divisions. So this week we'll be doing the West divisions. So check that out as we just pour on all the hate for the Seahawks this week.
I was just getting ready to say, make sure you say some good words about the Seahawks.
Well, I will tell you this. I've said this before. Jackson Smith and Jigba is my breakout fantasy player of the year. I think he's going to have a really solid season this year at Seattle. I do like me some Kenny Walker as well in Seattle, but we're not. It's not a fantasy show, so we're not talking fantasy on that show. We will be previewing though the season there. Next Sunday, we will have a show, but I won't be here. Kevin will be running the show. I'm going to be ejected, thrown out of the game pregame next week. And so Kevin will be taking over the duties here and probably have a guest on with them as well. So make sure you tune in next Sunday for more of the Sports Stove Fantasy Baseball Show. And Kevin can either rejoice or lament on where he's at that point in the standings in the fantasy league. Quick breakdown. I know most people don't care, but still, I don't care because I'm going to tell it to you anyways. Right now in our league, Chase Thornton, the defending champion, first place going into the final 3 weeks. I follow him. No, I don't. I'm sorry. Chase is in first. Dan D'Amico with a loss this week is in second place, 1 game ahead of me. Then Kevin and Nathan Nguyen will be in fourth place, tied for fourth place. And my dad is right behind him, a game back from you guys. We only have 4 teams make the playoffs. So it is a battle between the 3 of you at this point. I will have clinched my playoff berth this week with the win. And so I'm officially in. So it's 1 spot left and 3 weeks to determine who it will be. And again, 2 shout outs here. Number 1, shout out to Kevin Wilson, who has purposefully put himself in this situation for the betterment of this program. He thought it was important that we have someone that was clawing for a playoff spot. And so, Kevin, we appreciate you taking one for the team. And then shout out to Nathan Nguyen. He was one of, if not the worst team in our league last year. And he's turned it around big time.
I don't want to take too much credit, but I will, because him and I discussed this clear back in May.
Yeah.
And he was lamenting about his fantasy team, and I gave him some pointers, and ever since then he has just went off.
Yeah,
so
he is
congrats to you, Nathan, and I'm glad I was able to help you out if at all. Okay. And so I'm looking forward to these 3 weeks because, as you mentioned, this whole show was for me. Yeah. All right. And Nathan and your dad, because we have to win mode right now.
That's right. Nate is on a 6-game win streak. He's 11-8 on the season. Kevin was on a 2-game win streak. That gets cut short this week. And then Dad is on a 4-game win streak now. He scored a bunch of points this week as well. So he's doing his best to stay in the hunt. Also, Chase surpassed 500 points this week. That's only happened a few times this season. So
that's who I was playing. So I make no apologies because Chase number 1 and he beat me. So that's the way it goes.
That's the way it goes. So there you go. So we'll continue to keep an eye on that. These final 3 weeks are important in fantasy baseball. So make sure you stay with it. Finish out the season strong, whatever league you're in. And your league mates will greatly appreciate you. You can follow me on social media at Sports Stove. That's on Twitter and on Instagram as well. And then, like I said, next week, this show will be live Sunday, 8 p.m. Eastern time for you. Still going strong next week. Thanks again to BellyUpFantasySports.com, Righteous Felon, and SeatGeek for their help in the program. Thanks to Kevin, as always. And that's going to be it for tonight. So until next time, we'll see you around the Sports Stuff.
Everybody have